Does anyone here have any reason these two should not be joined? The doors of the Sky Pavilion slammed open before the officiant could finish. Every head turned. Cameras lifted like a field of metal sunflowers. In the doorway stood Darius Cole. The billionaire Amara Okoye had divorced a year ago, cut sharp in a charcoal tuxedo, the city lights of Victoria Island glittering behind him like a crown. But it was the woman on his arm that made the hall go silent. She moved with the calm of someone who had learned to stand tall in the wind. A satin gown the color of moonlight skimmed her shape. Her hair, once a ragged halo many Lagos commuters had seen at the Oniru bus stop, was now swept into soft waves. She wore simple diamond studs, a slim chain at her neck, and an expression that was half kindness, half flint. Several guests stopped breathing as recognition broke across their faces. "That's the girl who used to beg by the eco-traffic lights," someone whispered. "The one who always told him, 'God bless you, sir?'" Darius' voice carried without a microphone. "Amara," he said steady and sure, "you invited me to your wedding so I could learn regret. Tonight I brought truth." Amara stood frozen under a ceiling of blown glass chandeliers. Her lace veil trembled over her shoulders. On her left, her new fiancé, Kenichi Obi, son of a powerful senator, tightened his jaw. He had the polished look of old money, the cool hands of a man who expected the world to open for him. He didn't like surprises. "This is madness," Kenichi muttered. Darius walked down the aisle like it belonged to him, the woman at his side matching his pace. A path opened through the gold chairs, the flowers, the hush. Amara's bridesmaids in wine-colored osso oak shifted from one foot to the other. The band, unsure, lowered their instruments. Phone cameras glowed. Lagos itself seemed to lean closer, the lagoon lights blinking through the glass walls as if to watch. "Ladies and gentlemen," Darius said when he reached the front. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at Amara. "Meet Zuri." A few guests flinched at the name. Zuri. The girl in a faded hoodie who had once stood by the Lekki roundabout with a cardboard sign that said "Please help me eat." The girl who would step forward when Darius' black SUV rolled to the light and say, with her face lifted and unashamed, "Anything you have, sir." The girl he had given small bills to, then food, then his driver's extra jacket on a rainy day. The girl who always said, "One day I won't be here." "She doesn't belong here," Kenichi said under his breath. "Security." "Don't," Amara snapped back, but her voice had lost its gloss. She couldn't stop staring at Zuri's left hand. A ring glinted there, an oval of green, deep as forest. Something old, something that didn't look like Darius' style at all. Zuri met Amara's eyes and dipped her head in respect that wasn't a bow. Her voice, when she spoke, was warm Lagos night air. "Good evening, Ma." "Enough theatrics," Kenichi said. "You were invited, Mr. Cole, not to be a spectacle, but to witness what you lost." "What I lost?" Darius almost smiled. "You think I came to count old mistakes? I came to return something I took for granted and to keep a promise I made at a traffic light." Amara felt the room tilt. A year ago, she had slammed a door on a life of private jets and cold silences. She had told herself she'd chosen peace over luxury, heart over headlines. She had also told herself Darius would watch her move on and choke on the decision. She had sent the invitation by courier, her handwriting perfect, the message sharp as a pin. "Come and see what a real love looks like." Now he stood there holding another woman's hand. Not just any woman. The girl the city barely saw unless a windshield was between them. "Say whatever you came to say," Amara managed. "Then leave." Darius turned to the officiant. "Apologies, Pastor." He faced the room again. "I won't be long." He lifted Zuri's hand. The green stone flashed again. This time Amara's breath caught hard. That ring. The color of it, the thin gold band, the tiny nick on one side like a bite mark. It couldn't be. Years ago, when Amara was just a student with big dreams, her grandmother had slipped a ring onto her finger and said, "Carry this blessing." When money got tight, Amara had pawned it and told herself she'd buy it back. She never did. She told no one. "How?" Amara whispered, the word tearing free. "Where did you get that ring?" Zuri's eyes softened. "From a woman who said it was a blessing. She sold it to save her mother's health. She regretted it every day after. I promised I'd return it to her when God gave me away." The room rustled like dry leaves. Darius dipped a hand into his jacket and pulled out a slender folder with embossed edges. He passed it to the officiant, who blinked, then opened it. The man's eyes widened. The band, sensing an oncoming storm, abandoned any thought of a musical vamp. "Mr. and Mrs. Cole," the officiant read, stunned. This is a marriage certificate." Dated this morning. The hall erupted, gasps, shouts, the clicking fire of camera shutters. Kenichi swore. The senator at his table stood so fast his chair toppled. Amara's mother cupped a hand over her mouth, her gelly trembling. Married. Kenichi barked. To her? Amara's throat burned. She had staged this night like a theater director. She had chosen the scent of the flowers, the cut of the cake, the song the band would play when she walked back down the aisle on Kenichi's arm. Everything had been designed to send one message: you were not enough for me. Now her ex-husband had stolen the scene and rewritten the story with one sentence and a ring that belonged to her past. Why? Amara asked, and the word was not the sharp needle she wanted. It was the small voice of the girl who'd once caught a bus in the rain and told herself she wouldn't cry over a pawn ticket. Why bring her here? Why today? Because, Darius said, you asked me in that cream envelope to come and see love. I came to show you what it looks like when it is patient. When it doesn't throw people away. When it gives second chances, even to a man who didn't deserve one. He looked at Zuri the way a thirsty person looks at water. Zuri squeezed his hand once, not for the cameras but for his heart. Something in Amara cracked and tried to harden again. She told herself she was angry. She told herself she was embarrassed, ambushed, humiliated. Underneath all that, something colder stirred, fear. Because if Darius, who had once measured everything in numbers and outcomes, believed in a love like this now, then what did that make her? Someone who had traded a fight worth having for a victory that would look very good on Instagram. Kenichi stepped forward, forcing a smile that showed too many teeth. Congratulations on your morning decision, he said, his voice dropping to a low threat. But this is our evening. Pastor, please continue. The officiant did not move. Security edged the walls. The senator's aides spoke into their sleeves. Somewhere a child cried. Lagos watched. Zuri turned to Amara again. Ma, she said, careful and clear. I told you thank you once but you didn't hear me. Not for money. For the way you used to look at the girl at the bus stop like she was invisible, and it hurt me. It made me promise that if life ever changed, I'd make sure no one felt like that around me. This ring, it found me. I didn't steal it. I kept it safe until I could bring it home. Amara's face flushed. Memory rose like steam. A hard month, a sick mother, the pawnshop's cold glass, a clerk who didn't meet her eyes. She had buried the shame under titles, events, and articles. And this girl, this woman, had walked into her wedding wearing the very thing she had thrown away, not as a triumph but as a return. Darius' voice gentled. We didn't come to ruin you, Amara. We came to end a story the right way. You said I would regret tonight. I already regretted yesterday, how I treated people, how I treated you. I found a different way to measure success. Kenichi laughed once, sharp. By collecting people off the street? By seeing them, Darius said, unflinching. And by letting them see me. A murmur moved through the guests, some soft, some scornful. Lagos knew performance when it saw it. It also knew when the truth slipped out between lines. Amara steadied herself. There were always choices. A woman from Atlanta who learned Lagos fast, she had taught herself that you could drown in pride as easily as in water. But tonight had a plan. She was not going to let Darius stand in her light. She lifted her chin. You've made your statement, she said. Now let me make mine. She reached for the microphone meant for vows. Her hand was not shaking. The hall leaned in. I invited you because I wanted you to watch me be happy, she said plainly. I wanted you to understand that money can buy a venue, not peace. But since you brought your lesson to my wedding, let me give you mine. Love is not a theater. It is a house. And in a house, people know where things come from. She looked at Zuri's ring again, the deep green burning against the ivory silk. Her voice softened, cut with something like grief. That ring belonged to my grandmother, she said. And if it has found its way back to this room, then there is more to tonight than I knew. A power flicker raced across the chandeliers. The music stands hummed and went still. For a heartbeat the sky pavilion dimmed to a twilight, then surged bright again. In that small darkness, someone near the back shouted, "Play the video." A projector screen, meant for a slideshow of sweet photos, lit the glass wall with a paused image. Amara, hair in a head wrap, years younger, standing outside a pawnshop with a brown envelope in her hands. The timestamp burned in the corner. Who put that up? Kenichi barked, voice cracking now. The screen blinked to black, then to a second frozen frame. Zuri in the rain at the Oniru bus stop, soaked through, holding a cardboard sign. Between the two images, a third thumbnail waited. A file whose title glowed in bold, The Truth About This Ring. The room held its breath as a finger hovered near the play icon. And then with the whole of Lagos waiting, the video began. The projector's first frame melted into motion. Rain fell in sheets across the screen, the kind that turns Lagos traffic into a crawling snake of horns and glare. A phone camera shook as it zoomed on a young woman at the Oniru bus stop. Sorry. Soaked hoodie, bare hands, cardboard sign turning to pulp. She kept her chin up. Cars rolled past like cold planets. A black SUV slid into view. Its window came down. Darius' driver stretched a hand with a steaming paper bag. Zuri reached for it then stopped. Please, give the food to the mother with 2 children, she said, pointing at a woman huddled under a bridge rail. I can wait. The camera cut. New angle, same storm. The driver returned, empty bag gone. Darius himself stepped out with an umbrella. He looked like a man and used to doing small things in the rain. He held the umbrella over Zuri and said something the phone didn't catch. Subtitles, someone had added them, flickered along the bottom. What is your name? Zuri. What would help you today? Work, sir. Not pity. A ripple went through the sky pavilion. Guests shifted, the senator frowned, Amara's bridesmaids whispered. The bandleader put his trumpet down, eyes fixed to the screen. The video cut to a quieter afternoon. The same bus stop, dry now, bright like new coins. Zuri in the same hoodie, this time with neat braids and a clean scarf. Darius SUV again. This time, instead of money through a cracked window, a paper envelope thick with forms. The subtitle read, If you want it, I can sponsor you for classes. Hospitality skills. We have a training partner in Yaba. No strings. No strings. Zuri asked. She looked suspicious and hopeful at once. No strings, Darius said. Just one condition. What is it? You have to show up. On the stage, Kenichi barked a dry laugh. This is a campaign ad, he muttered, loud enough for the front rows. Cameras and charity. But the next frame did not show Darius. It showed Zuri's feet. Blisters, broken nail polish, a bandage stuck crooked on one toe. Then it showed a small classroom under humming fans, chalkboard words, Food Safety 101. Zuri sat with a group of other women and men in plain t-shirts, some shy, some grinning. The trainer paced, teaching how to fold napkins into lilies, how to greet a guest without shrinking. A date stamp in the corner crawled forward, weeks into months. Shots came quick now, Zuri practicing English dialogues with a Ghanaian auntie. Zuri borrowing a blazer and learning to tie a scarf 4 different ways. Zuri failing a test on day 1, then passing on day 7, then ranking top 5 by week 3. Another cut. Zuri at a salon in a market stall, hair softened into waves, her smile small and stunned when she first saw herself in the mirror. The phone camera kept its distance like it knew this was private. Someone in the audience exhaled. Another wiped eyes they would later swear were only itchy from the AC. The senator's wife leaned forward, her geli a bright crown, held there by a dozen hidden pins and a lifetime of discipline. Amara felt heat rise and fall in her chest. The video had a careful hand. It wasn't rich man saving poor woman. It was poor woman refusing to stay small, and a man finally making a choice that didn't cost someone else their voice. She had wished to show Darius what love looked like when it was simple. Here he was, surprising her with something simple she had not expected from him, consistency. On screen the story moved. A narrow shop on Broad Street, glass counter filled with small rings and pendants. The camera focused on a velvet pad. There, clear as memory, the green stone. Oval. Thin band. The tiny nick like a bite mark. A voice behind the camera, steady, older, maybe the shop owner, narrated in Yoruba and then in English. This ring came to us years ago, sold in a hurry by a young lady. She cried after, came back to ask for it but did not have the money. We kept it. People forget but some things wait. The footage jumped, to a night market, to a whisper of different stalls, to a ledger book with careful lines. The voice continued, a man came. He wore a cap low. He said he would buy the ring as a gift, cash, no receipt. He paid little. I felt a shadow on him so I wrote his name anyway in my private book. Don't look at me like that. I am old. I am not a fool. A murmur rocked the hall. Kenichi's jaw clenched. The shopkeeper's thumb moved from the ledger onto a name. The camera zoomed, clearing the grain. The letters were plain, clumsy, insisting, Kenichi Obi. A gasp ran across the rows like a thrown wave. Heads turned. The senator's face tightened into a hard, gray thing. Kenichi lifted both hands, smiling for the audience with the grace of a man who has spent his life training a face to behave. Old books, he said, shrugging to the room. Anybody can write a name. The video answered him. It cut to blurry CCTV footage. A neat man in an expensive polo leaning over a glass counter, profile clear, a wristwatch gleaming. He tapped the glass at the green stone. He slid cash in an envelope, then held up 2 fingers to emphasize, no receipt. The shopkeeper, younger then, kept his own hands folded. The screen froze on the man's face. It was Kenichi. No cap. No doubt. Turn that off. Kenichi snapped now, voice slicing the hush. 2 security men flinched into motion, then stalled when the senator, his father, lifted a single finger that meant wait. Zuri's voice, recorded, moved through the speakers. I didn't know what the ring was, sir, she told the shopkeeper on camera. Just that it looked like a blessing. How do I return a blessing to the right person? Blessing finds its address, the old man said with a smile. If you don't block the road. The film kept threading pieces together. Zuri working as a trainee hostess at a quiet restaurant off Adeola Odiku. Zuri learning wine service without tasting it. Zuri sending money back to a woman in Ajigunal who had taken her in when times were rough. Then, Zuri cleaning the back room one evening and finding a sealed envelope on the floor, the corner torn. Inside, a photo, a young Amara in a head wrap outside a pawn shop, brown envelope in hand, bitterness on her mouth and tears in her eyes. The time stamp matched the one flickering now on the big screen. How did that get there? Someone whispered. The next clip had Darius in it, filmed from far away through a doorway he didn't know was open. He sat with an old man over pepper soup and listened more than he spoke. His face, usually a polished mask, looked unguarded. He kept asking the same questions in different ways. If you've failed someone, how do you try again? If you've been arrogant, how do you start with low things? The old man had laughed. You start by carrying your own spoon to eat your soup. Laughter skittered through the hall, thin and real. Even the bandleader smiled. The video's mood shifted. Days sped up. Zuri grew into her uniform. Black skirt, crisp white shirt, name tag, Zuri A. She carried trays with calm hands and corrected orders in a soft voice that made kitchen fires settle. Then one morning, before the restaurant opened, the camera showed her in a small office with Darius. The desk held 2 papers, a marriage registry application and a compact mirror with a smudge of lipstick. Zuri's hands shook, then stilled. Darius didn't touch her. He touched the pen. He pushed it toward her and waited. I won't turn you into a story, he said. I'll turn with you. If you say no, I will still show up tomorrow. If you say yes, we build slow. We honor where you came from. Zuri looked right at him, then right into the camera, as if seeing everyone who would ever judge her. I didn't come here for a crown, she said. I came for a chance. If we do this, we do it with God's eyes on us and everybody else is behind us. She signed. A soft sound like a shared breath moved across the room. Amara felt it in her bones. She had thought Darius didn't believe in anything he couldn't count. Now here he was, counting days, counting small kindnesses, counting a woman's dignity as the most expensive thing in the room. The film slowed. The green ring returned to the center of the frame, catching lamplight. The shopkeeper's finger tapped the ledger on one more entry. Date, 2 years ago. Note, buyer returned today. Asked to exchange for bigger stone. I refused. He left angry. The CCTV flashed again. Kenichi again pushing a different ring across the counter. Returning, bargaining, failing. He left with nothing but the same tight smile. The screen went black. Then a final title card burned white. Some things you hide find their own voice. Lights came up. The Sky Pavilion sat in the ragged silence after a truth lands. Kenichi clapped once, twice, slow mocking. Beautiful edit, he said. Very moving. But this is a wedding, not a film festival. Pastor, can we continue? Or shall we take a vote like we're at a town hall? The senator rose at last, face set. Keen, he said quietly, the way fathers speak when they've stepped on a crack in the road and found it is a canyon. Did you buy that ring? Kenichi's smile didn't move. Father, I have bought many things. Amara stood without realizing she had. She watched the man beside her, the man who had promised to be kind and never cold like Darius. She remembered small moments that had seemed nothing at the time. The way Kenichi tipped waiters with a flick of fingers without eye contact. The way he introduced her to people by title, not name. The way he joked about collecting strays when she donated to a shelter. The pastor cleared his throat, unsure whether to speak. No one helped him. Then a door at the far end opened with a soft click. The woman who walked in wore a simple Ankara dress and a cardigan that had been mended careful and neat. She wasn't on the guest list. She moved like someone who had decided to be brave and hoped her knees would agree. She stopped near the aisle, lifted a folded paper, and in a voice that carried without a microphone said, "I am the pawnshop clerk from that day." Kenichi's hand stilled in the air. The woman unfolded the paper and held it up. Ink bled through the fibers. "He told me," she said, nodding toward Kenichi, "to lose the record and take a gift. I took the gift. Then I took this photocopy for myself and kept it at home because my spirit was not resting." She met Amara's eyes. "Madam," she said softly, "the ring was yours from the beginning." The hall tilted again. Something broke clean inside Amara's chest. Not a bone, but a bad story she had told herself to survive. She reached for air and found memory, her grandmother's laughing eyes, the ring warm from old fingers, the words "carry this blessing." Before she could speak, the fire alarm shrieked. Red lights streaked across glass and gold. Staff shouted. Somewhere in the kitchen, a small cloud of smoke rose and every sprinkler in the sky pavilion burst to life, drenching flowers, silk, tuxedos, and pride. The crowd screamed and scattered. The band covered their instruments with coats. The senator cursed. Kenichi seized Amara's wrist. "Come with me," he snapped, dragging her toward a side exit through the white rain. "Now." Amara pulled back, eyes blazing. "Let go." "You didn't?" Darius took one step forward, face hard, and then the projector flickered back on by itself, shorting through the spray. One last unscheduled frame flashed 10 feet wide, an email screenshot tagged from Kenichi's account, subject: "Tonight's surprise entry." The line beneath it glowed: "Pay the technician at 8:15. Kill the power at 8:20. Cue video when I signal." The sprinklers hissed. The hall froze. Kenichi's hand dropped from Amara's wrist. And for the second time that night, everyone realized the person who thought he controlled the story had just lost it. The fire alarm died abruptly, leaving a wet, echoing quiet. Water dripped from the chandeliers like tears of crystal. Guests stood soaked, mascara running, tuxedos clinging. The perfume of ruined flowers filled the air. Kenichi stared at the projected email, his own words blazing across the glass wall like an accusation from heaven. "Pay the technician. Kill the power. Cue video when I signal." There was no escape. The senator stepped forward, fury trembling through his voice. "Kenichi, you did this?" Kenichi's lips moved but no sound came. The weight of hundreds of eyes pinned him where he stood. Amara felt her knees weaken but she refused to fall. "You planned all this?" she whispered. "You set me up to embarrass Darius?" He turned to her, face wet, hair plastered down. "Amara, listen. I only wanted you to see what kind of manipulator he is. That video he—" "Enough," the senator barked. His voice cut through the dripping silence. "You forged documents. You bribed people. You brought disgrace to my name on live broadcast." He faced the crowd with the heavy dignity of an elder who knew every camera was watching. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. This wedding is over." A collective gasp filled the air. Kenichi spun around, panic creeping into his voice. "Father, please don't do this here. Not in front of them." But the senator was already walking away. His security detail followed, clearing a path through the drenched aisle. The sound of their footsteps faded. All that remained was the smell of smoke, wet fabric, and silence. Amara stood trembling, her veil drooping, the heavy dress clinging to her legs. The woman who had once controlled every detail of tonight, the flowers, the cake, the cameras, now felt like a stranger in her own story. Then Zuri stepped forward. The crowd's eyes followed her. The poor girl who once begged for food now stood tall under the rain of sprinklers, her silver gown clinging like armor, her chin lifted. The lights caught her skin, deep brown, luminous, unashamed. She looked at Amara with calm eyes. "Ma, let's get you a towel," she said softly, reaching out. Amara blinked, uncertain whether to push her hand away or take it. For a brief moment she saw not a rival, not a beggar, not the wife of her ex-husband, but a young woman who had carried herself with more grace tonight than anyone else in the hall. The two women stood facing each other in the ruined wedding. Between them hung everything that had been lost and everything that could still be redeemed. Then, faintly, applause began, first from a waiter, then from another guest, then spreading like fire through the soaked room. It wasn't mockery, it was awe. The guests clapped for the truth that had survived the lies. Zuri lowered her eyes and took Amara's hand. "You deserve peace," she said gently. "Not people who break your name to make themselves look whole." Amara swallowed hard. "And you, what do you deserve?" Zuri smiled faintly. "Grace. Same as everyone." Darius stepped closer, his tuxedo soaked through, dark curls plastered to his forehead. His voice was steady, though the room swayed with emotion. "Zuri," he said quietly, "we should go." But Amara's voice stopped him. "Darius." He turned. "I thought inviting you here would make you regret losing me. I wanted you to see what you'd thrown away." She paused, eyes glistening. "But tonight I'm the one learning regret." Her words hung like rain in the air. Darius said nothing. He only looked at her with the quiet, steady gaze of a man who had already made peace with his past. "We both lost something," he finally said. "But some losses are blessings in disguise." Zuri's hand found his. The way their fingers laced, natural, unforced, spoke of a love born from respect, not pride. Amara let out a trembling breath. "Then go," she said, "before my heart changes again." Zuri nodded. "Thank you, Ma." The trio walked slowly toward the glass doors, their reflections flickering in the puddles across the marble floor. Guests stepped aside. The cameras that had come to film a fairy tale now captured something far rarer, a second chance wrapped in humility. As the doors opened, the Lagos night greeted them with soft drizzle and neon light. The sound of distant traffic hummed like a new beginning. Amara remained inside, surrounded by wilted roses and cooling chaos. Her friends hovered, unsure whether to comfort her or keep their distance. She waved them away gently, her mind racing back through every argument, every choice, every cold silence that had built the wall between her and Darius. For the first time in years, tears came freely, not of rage but of release. Outside, Darius and Zuri stood beneath the awning. A chauffeur rushed forward with an umbrella, but Darius waved him off. "We're already wet," he said, smiling faintly. Zuri laughed softly, the sound warm against the night. "It feels like the sky is washing everything clean." He turned to her. "You don't regret marrying me so fast?" She shook her head, droplets glistening in her hair. "When life offers you grace, you don't wait to schedule it." They got into the car. As the doors closed, the noise of the crowd faded behind the glass. For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the rain patter against the roof. Then Darius spoke. "You saved me tonight." Zuri turned to him, her eyes reflecting the passing lights. "No," she said softly. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you what you could be." He smiled, genuinely this time. The car pulled away, leaving the broken wedding behind like a washed-out dream. Back inside the Sky Pavilion, Amara sat alone in the empty hall. A single light flickered over her as she looked at the soaked bouquet on the floor. In its reflection, she saw two versions of herself: the proud woman who chased perfection, and the humbled woman now learning peace through pain. She whispered, "Maybe that was the real lesson, Grandma. Blessings always find their address." The door creaked open behind her. It was the old pawnshop clerk, cardigan dripping, eyes kind. She handed Amara a small velvet box. Inside lay another green stone, smaller but still beautiful. "I kept one more," the woman said, "in case the first never found its way home." Amara smiled faintly. "It did," she whispered. "Just not to me." Outside, as Darius' car crossed the bridge toward Ikoyi, Zuri rested her head on his shoulder. "What will you do now?" she asked. He looked out at the shimmering water. "Start over. Build something clean. Maybe use what I have to give others a chance like you got." Zuri smiled. "Then let's build it together." He nodded. Together. The headlights disappeared into the misty horizon, leaving only the sound of rain and the hum of the city. A reminder that even the richest man can lose everything, and even the poorest girl can rise higher than anyone imagined. Comment below where you're watching from. Globe showing Europe, Africa. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters of this gripping story. The next morning, Lagos woke to headlines that refused to sleep. Billionaire stops ex-wife's wedding with shocking video. The beggar who became his bride. High society in shambles after Sky Pavilion scandal. Phones buzzed from Surulere to Abuja. Hashtags trended. Blogs dissected every frame of the leaked footage. The once private lives of Darius Cole, Amara Okoye, and Zuri Adenike now belonged to the world. But inside Darius' mansion in Ikoyi, it was unusually quiet. The house that once echoed with marble footsteps and distant staff chatter now smelled of wet roses and warm bread. Zuri moved gently through the living room, her scarf tied back, barefoot on the polished floor. She wasn't dressed like a billionaire's wife. No diamonds, no makeup, just a white cotton gown and the faint scent of coconut oil. On the coffee table, newspapers lay scattered. Her eyes caught one headline. "From beggar to billionaire's wife, is this love or pity?" She frowned, quietly folded the paper and set it aside. Darius walked in wearing a simple gray t-shirt and black joggers, far from his usual designer suits. His face was drawn, thoughtful. He'd spent the night on calls from investors, PR agents, and board members panicking about the scandal. But right now he wasn't thinking about reputation, he was thinking about Zuri. "You haven't eaten," he said, noticing the untouched tray beside her. "I will," she replied softly, stirring her tea. "You didn't sleep either." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's strange. I've signed deals worth hundreds of millions and I never shook the way I did last night." Zuri looked up, eyes steady. "Because this time it wasn't money you were risking, it was your heart." That silenced him. He sat across from her, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "The world thinks I married you to prove a point," he said. "They think I wanted revenge." "And what do you think?" she asked. Darius gave a quiet laugh, almost bitter. "I think, maybe for the first time, I don't care what the world thinks." Zuri smiled faintly. "Then that's the start of freedom." At that same hour, Amara sat in her apartment in Lekki, wrapped in a robe, her hair undone, staring at the TV. Every channel replayed clips from the night before. The wedding that never was. Her name trended beside words like heartbreak and karma. She switched off the screen. Her mother, a regal woman in her late 50s with tired eyes, stood by the window. "Amara, you can't hide forever," she said gently. Amara sighed. "I wasn't hiding, Mama. I was healing." Her mother walked closer, touching her shoulder. "Healing starts when you stop defending the wound. That man, Kenichi, he fooled everyone. Including you." Amara's lips quivered. "And Darius? Did I fool him, or myself?" The older woman smiled sadly. "You loved him. But you loved the idea of control more. Sometimes love looks like power until it leaves you powerless." Amara turned away, blinking fast. "He embarrassed me, Mama?" "No," her mother said softly. "Truth embarrassed pride. There's a difference." Meanwhile, in a small studio office in Yaba, two young journalists replayed the viral video frame by frame. One of them, Kamsi, a sharp-tongued media blogger, leaned closer to the screen. "See that logo in the bottom corner? That's from an internal camera. Someone in the wedding crew leaked it." "Who?" his partner asked. Kamsi zoomed in, spotting a shadowy figure adjusting the lens near the projector. "Look at that. That's not the technician Darius hired." "Then who?" Kamsi smirked. "A setup. The groom wanted control of the story, but it looks like the story controlled him." They uploaded the full video online with the headline, "Leaked footage exposes the man behind Amara's failed wedding." Within hours, millions had watched it. Public sympathy swung toward Darius and Zuri. That evening, Darius' phone buzzed again. Zuri was in the garden, kneeling near a line of rose bushes. She'd insisted on tending them herself, saying, "Beauty feels real when you grow it with your own hands." He joined her, watching the sunset streak orange and gold across the lagoon. "Zuri," he said quietly, "the board wants me to issue a press statement. They're worried this marriage will make investors nervous." She looked up, her fingers dusty from the soil. "So what will you tell them?" "That I don't marry for headlines," he replied. "I marry for home." She smiled. "Then you've already said everything." He hesitated. "The world can be cruel, Zuri. You've seen the comments, street girl, gold digger, charity project." "I've seen worse," she said calmly. "I grew up with people who thought my name didn't deserve to be remembered. But if God remembered me at that bus stop, why should I fear gossip?" Her peace disarmed him. He knelt beside her. "You're stronger than anyone I know." She wiped her hands on a cloth, looked at him and said quietly, "No. I'm just grateful." Across town, Amara's phone rang. She hesitated before answering. The caller ID said Darius. Her voice trembled slightly. "Why are you calling?" "To check on you," he said softly. "Last night? I never meant for things to end that way. I didn't plan the video, Amara." "I know," she whispered. "It was Kenichi. I found his messages." Silence hung between them. Memories rushed back. The laughter, the fights, the love they once buried under pride. "You look happy," she said finally, her voice breaking. "With her." "I am," he admitted. "And I hope one day you'll be too." She exhaled slowly. Maybe happiness was never the problem. Maybe gratitude was. He smiled faintly. "Then you still understand me." "Goodbye, Darius," she said, and hung up gently before her heart could change its mind. That night, Zuri found Darius standing on the balcony, staring at the Lagos skyline. The city buzzed below, alive with the noise of taxis and street vendors and people chasing dreams. He turned when she joined him. "You know what's strange?" he said. "A year ago I thought I had everything. Money, power, comfort. But I never felt alive." "And now?" she asked. He smiled softly. "Now I feel human." Zuri reached for his hand. "That's all we ever needed to be." The night breeze wrapped around them like a promise. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, but it sounded less like a warning and more like applause from the heavens. As they stood together under the Lagos stars, Darius whispered, "Let's build something that outlives gossip." Zuri's eyes shone. "Like what?" He looked at her and said, "A foundation. For women like you, like us. We'll call it the Grace Project." She smiled, tears of quiet joy in her eyes. "Then let's start tomorrow." Back in Lekki, Amara stood by her window watching the same sky. She wasn't angry anymore, just quiet. She placed her grandmother's second ring on her finger, the one the pawn clerk had returned. "For every loss," she murmured, "there's a lesson." Outside, the city pulsed with light. 3 lives, once tangled in pride and pain, now stretched in different directions, healed by truth and time. And though the world still gossiped, Lagos had moved on. But for those 3 hearts, the story had only just begun. The morning sun poured gently over Lagos Lagoon, painting the skyline in shades of amber and gold. Birds fluttered across the water as the city awakened. For Darius and Zuri it was a new dawn, not just of a new day but of a new life. Zuri sat at the dining table sipping warm pap and milk. Darius, in a white shirt rolled at the sleeves, read through stacks of documents. But these weren't corporate contracts or investment deals. They were proposals for something different, the Grace Project. A foundation for homeless women, street hawkers, and young girls without opportunities. Zuri's idea. "Here," she said, sliding a paper toward him, "I think we should start with skill training first, not housing. If you give people homes without hope, they'll still feel empty." Darius looked at her for a moment, proud, amused, and deeply moved. "When you talk like that, Zuri, I see the woman who changed my life." She smiled softly. "And when you listen like that, I see the man I prayed for." He chuckled. "You prayed for me?" "I prayed for change," she said. "God just used you to answer it." The doorbell rang. Darius's security guard walked in with an envelope. "Sir, this came by courier." "No sender." Darius opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. He read it silently, then passed it to Zuri. "You've turned your shame into light. I hope one day I can do the same. Amara." Zuri's expression softened. "She's trying." "She always was strong," Darius said quietly. "Just too proud to show her heart." Zuri reached across the table and touched his hand. "Maybe this time she will." Across town in Lekki, Amara stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her blouse. Gone was the glamour of lace gowns and heavy jewelry. She wore a simple blue wrapper, her natural hair styled neatly. The woman staring back at her wasn't a fallen socialite, she was a woman ready to start again. Her mother entered with a small bowl of porridge. "You're going out early?" Amara nodded. "Yes, Mama. I found a teaching job at a community center in Surulere. They said they need someone to teach English." Her mother smiled, relief in her eyes. "That's good, my daughter. It's time you gave instead of guarded." Amara smiled faintly. "I think that's what I was missing all along." As she left the house, she passed her old wedding gown still hanging by the corner, the one she hadn't had the heart to throw away. She paused, then whispered, "You were never worn for the wrong man. You were just waiting for me to find myself first." She smiled, closed the door behind her, and stepped into the sunlight. Later that afternoon, the Grace Project held its first official meeting in a modest office at Yaba. Zuri, dressed in a cream blouse and Ankara skirt, stood before a whiteboard scribbled with ideas. Empowerment, training, shelter, restoration. Darius sat quietly at the back, letting her lead. "Many of us," Zuri said to the small group of volunteers, "have stories that began on the street, not because we were lazy but because we were unseen. The world looks at poor people and sees failure. But we're not failed, we're unfinished. And if we can help even one woman finish her story with dignity, we've done something bigger than money." Her voice wavered slightly at the end. The room erupted in soft applause. Darius felt his chest tighten with pride. This wasn't the girl he'd handed money to at a traffic light. This was a woman shaping destiny, his and hers. After the meeting, a young reporter from Pulse NG approached them. "Sir, Mrs. Cole, people are still talking about the wedding. Do you have a message for your critics?" Zuri smiled gracefully. Tell them that love is not about where you start. It's about what you build together. And you, sir? The reporter asked. Darius paused, his gaze steady. Tell them that I've been rich before. But this time I'm wealthy, in peace. The clip went viral again, but this time the narrative shifted. The internet began calling Zuri the billionaire's blessing. Meanwhile, Amara's days slowly found rhythm. She taught grammar and storytelling to children who had never known privilege. One day, a girl named Temi handed her a crumpled paper with scribbles that said, "My dream is to be like you, Auntie." Amara smiled and knelt beside her. Then promise me one thing, she said. Never measure your worth by what people see. True beauty grows in quiet places. That night, Amara sat on her balcony reading the note again. The wind whispered through the curtains, carrying the sound of laughter from the street. For the first time in years, her heart was light. She whispered a quiet prayer for Darius and Zuri, not in bitterness but in peace. Weeks later, the Grace Project's first training center opened in Mushin. The event drew crowds, young women, reporters, even government officials. The air smelled of jollof rice, new paint, and possibility. As Darius and Zuri stood before the crowd, a familiar figure appeared among the guests, Amara. She wore a plain gown, no makeup, but carried herself with quiet confidence. Zuri noticed her first. Their eyes met across the courtyard. Zuri walked toward her and smiled warmly. You came. Amara nodded. I had to. You're doing something beautiful here. Darius joined them, unsure what to say. Amara turned to him. Darius, I wanted to thank you for reminding me that love isn't revenge. It's responsibility. He nodded slowly. We both had to learn that. She looked at Zuri. Take care of him. He's stubborn, but he listens to truth. Zuri smiled. I've noticed. Amara extended her hand. Zuri took it, and in that simple handshake, every ounce of bitterness melted away. The past had lost its grip. Before leaving, Amara whispered, You wore the ring better than I ever could. Zuri blinked back tears. Maybe it was always meant to find the right finger. That night, as fireworks cracked above Lagos Lagoon celebrating the launch of the Grace Project, Darius and Zuri stood by the balcony of their new office, watching the lights dance across the water. Do you ever wonder how life would have been, Zuri asked softly, if you never stopped at that bus stop? Darius smiled, his arm around her shoulder. Then I'd still be rich but lost. Meeting you was the only thing that ever made sense. Zuri leaned into him. And to think, it all began with a 500 naira note. He laughed. Best investment I ever made. They stood together as the sky exploded in color, two souls once separated by class and pain, now united by grace. Below them, the sign of their foundation glowed in golden letters. The Grace Project, restoring hope, one story at a time. And for the first time, Darius realized that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in second chances. 3 months later, the Grace Project had become a movement. What began as a single office in Yaba had grown into 3 centers across Lagos, in Mushin, Surulere, and Ajij. The initiative trained over 200 women in tailoring, catering, and business management. The success stories were already rippling through the city like sunlight breaking through morning fog. But behind the triumph, something darker brewed quietly, not from Zuri or Darius but from the world outside. Fame, even the kind born of goodness, attracts envy. It began one evening when Darius sat at his office desk, reviewing donation records. Zuri had just finished mentoring a group of young women when she entered, her headscarf tied loosely, face glowing from the day's work. You look tired, she said softly, leaning against the doorway. He looked up, smiling. You sound like my conscience. That's because I am, she teased, walking over. It's late. You should rest. Just a few more minutes. There's something odd here, he murmured, flipping through a report. One of our financial accounts, it shows a transfer I don't recognize. Zuri frowned. From who? Someone named Kenichi Foundation. Her breath caught. Kenichi? You mean? Yes, Darius said, jaw tightening. Your ex-fiancé. Zuri moved closer. What does he want? Darius opened the attached message. Read. Consider this my apology to the both of you. Every empire falls but the wise rebuild. Accept this as a peace offering. Kenichi Obi. Zuri exhaled slowly. Do you believe him? Darius leaned back, eyes narrowing. Kenichi doesn't give peace. He trades it for leverage. She placed a hand on his arm. Then we give him none. He smiled faintly. You're learning to think like me. No, she said. You're learning to listen like me. A week later, during one of the Grace Project's empowerment events, a scandal erupted online. Hashtag the Grace Project fraud trended on Twitter. A fake news report claimed the foundation was laundering money through foreign accounts. Screenshots, fabricated but convincing, showed transfers labeled under Darius' name. Within hours, sponsors began calling. Reporters surrounded the gate. The same tabloids that once celebrated Zuri now accused her of pretending to be a saint while hiding millions. Zuri sat frozen as her phone buzzed nonstop. Tears gathered in her eyes. "They're saying I stole from my own project." Darius looked at her, steady but furious. "We'll find out who's behind it." The following day, a journalist from CityWatch Nigeria confronted them during a press briefing. "Mr. Cole," she said sharply, "how do you respond to allegations that your wife embezzled donor funds?" Before Darius could speak, Zuri stepped forward. She looked directly into the camera and said calmly, "I was born invisible and I know what it feels like to be judged by what people think they see. But this project was built to lift women like me, not to use them. If I had wanted money, I would have stayed begging on the street because at least then I slept peacefully. We have our records, our receipts, and our truth. Time will reveal them." Her words went viral. But the damage was done. Donors began pulling out. The media frenzy grew. That night, Darius called his private investigator. "Find out who planted this story. Follow the source." 3 days later, the investigator returned with a file. Darius opened it and froze. Inside were photos, Kenichi meeting a blogger at a hotel, paying him envelopes of cash. Screenshots of email exchanges coordinating the leak. Proof beyond doubt. Darius' voice hardened. "He wanted to destroy her because he couldn't destroy me." Zuri clenched her fists. "Then let's show him what real grace looks like." He turned to her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" She smiled sadly. "Forgive him. But make sure the truth is louder than his lies." That weekend, they held a live press conference at the Lagos Civic Center. Hundreds attended. The same media houses that had spread the false story came again, cameras, lights, and all. Zuri stepped to the microphone, poised and fearless. "I was once a beggar," she began. "And when you come from nothing, you have two choices: fight the mud or throw it. I chose to fight it." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Someone tried to ruin what we built. But we kept every record, every receipt, every donation. Our auditors are here today, and they'll confirm what's true." A middle-aged accountant approached the stage with a laptop. The screen behind her displayed official records, transparent accounts, audited by a reputable firm. Every naira accounted for. The audience murmured. Zuri continued, "We forgive the man behind the lies. But we also remind him, you can't bury light. It finds its way through the cracks." The hall erupted in applause. Darius took the microphone next. "The Grace Project will continue. Because when we lift others, we rise above our enemies." By the end of the day, the truth trended again, this time under hashtag #GraceOverGreed. Public sympathy returned. Donations flooded back. Kenichi's name became synonymous with shame. That night, on their balcony overlooking the city, Zuri leaned into Darius' chest. "You didn't fight him," she whispered. "You could have destroyed him." He kissed her forehead. "I didn't have to. You already won with grace." She smiled. "I'm not sure if I'm strong or just tired." He laughed softly. "You're strong because you're tired and still standing." They stood in silence for a while, the hum of Lagos traffic beneath them. Then Zuri said quietly, "You know what I want to do next?" "What?" he asked. "I want to open a center in the north, for girls displaced by conflict. Let's take the Grace Project beyond Lagos." Darius smiled. "Then we start tomorrow." Across the city, in a dark hotel room, Kenichi watched the news replay on a cracked TV screen. His reflection stared back at him, tired, defeated, forgotten. His phone buzzed with unpaid calls from creditors. The empire his father built was crumbling. He picked up a glass of whiskey, stared at it, then set it down untouched. On the screen, Zuri's speech replayed, "You can't bury light. It finds its way through the cracks." Kenichi turned off the TV and muttered to himself, "Maybe, she's right." For the first time in his life, he felt something heavier than shame, remorse. 2 days later, an anonymous donation appeared in the Grace Project's account. It was large and tagged simply, "For the ones I couldn't see." Zuri read the note quietly and smiled. "Do you think it's him?" Darius nodded. "Yes. And maybe this time it's real." As they looked out across Lagos that evening, the skyline glowing, the lagoon shimmering, they realized something beautiful. Grace hadn't just changed their story. It was rewriting everyone's. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Backhand index pointing down. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story if you believe that grace always wins over revenge. The months that followed tested both love and faith. Fame, after all, is a fickle friend. For every person who admired the Grace Project, there were others who whispered that Zuri's humility was just strategy, that no one rose from poverty so gracefully without a hidden agenda. But while gossip made noise, grace made progress. And in the quiet corners of Nigeria, women's lives were changing. A soft harmattan morning found Zuri in Kano, standing before a group of young women at a dusty compound that had once been an abandoned school. Now it bore a new signboard. The Grace Project, Northern Women Empowerment Center. The air smelled of dry wind and fresh paint. Beside her stood Darius, dressed down in khaki trousers and a light shirt. The heat shimmered, but his focus was steady on the crowd before them. Over 100 women and girls, some veiled, others wearing bright Ankara scarves, all full of hope. Zuri stepped to the microphone, voice calm but commanding. I came from the streets of Lagos. I begged to eat. But today I'm here to remind you, your story doesn't end where you fell, it begins when you rise. Applause rippled through the crowd. Even the governor's wife, seated near the front, nodded with visible admiration. Zuri continued, we will teach tailoring, hairdressing, digital literacy, and business management. Because the only thing stronger than hunger is the will to change. Darius watched her speak with awe. This woman, the same one who once stood in traffic begging with trembling hands, now inspired hundreds. She was no longer a symbol of pity, but a mirror reflecting what faith and second chances could do. When she finished, he stepped forward, taking her hand as the cameras flashed. This is the future, he said. Not charity, empowerment. The applause that followed was thunderous. That night at their guest lodge, Zuri sat by the window, staring at the northern skyline lit faintly by generator lights. The wind carried the distant sound of prayers from a nearby mosque. Darius approached, holding 2 cups of tea. You've barely said a word since we got back, he said gently. Zuri smiled weakly. I'm just thinking about how far we've come. Sometimes I still wake up afraid that I'll open my eyes and find myself back at that bus stop. He set the cup beside her. You'll never go back there again. She looked at him. You promise? He nodded. As long as I breathe. She smiled faintly. Then promise me one more thing, that you won't stop helping people when it gets hard. Because someday even we might need help again. He sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You're my anchor, Zuri. You remind me why all of this matters. Back in Lagos, Amara's new life was also taking shape. Her small classroom in Surulere had grown from 10 students to 50. She taught English and storytelling, and parents began calling her Auntie Amara of Words. Her lessons weren't just about grammar, they were about truth. One afternoon as she packed up, a familiar voice called from the door. You still know how to teach like you're saving the world. She turned and froze. Kenichi stood there, dressed simply, no driver, no arrogance, just a man who looked older and quieter than before. Her face hardened. What are you doing here? He raised his hands slightly. Not to fight. Just to apologize. For everything. She said nothing, but her eyes warned him to tread carefully. I lost everything, he said. My company, my father's respect, my friends. I even lost myself. But watching what you and Zuri did with Grace, it made me think. I wanted to tell you I'm sorry, not because I need forgiveness but because I finally understand what I destroyed. Amara studied him for a long time. His face was sincere. His eyes, no longer sharp and proud, now carried the dull ache of regret. You don't deserve forgiveness, she said quietly. But you deserve peace. You can't change yesterday, Kenichi. But you can change how you walk tomorrow. He nodded slowly. I will. Thank you, Amara. Then without asking for more he left. Amara exhaled, feeling a strange lightness in her chest. It wasn't love. It wasn't anger. It was release. Weeks later, tragedy struck in silence. Zuri and Darius returned to Lagos after a successful launch in Kano. That evening Zuri fell ill, a sudden fever that wouldn't break. Doctors said it was malaria, severe but manageable. Darius stayed by her side, refusing to leave the hospital. Rest, he whispered, holding her hand. The project can wait. I'm fine, she murmured weakly. Just tired. But by midnight, her breathing grew shallow. The doctors rushed in. The beeping machines blurred into noise. Darius's heart pounded as he watched her pale under the fluorescent lights. Zuri, stay with me, he shouted, gripping her hand. Her eyelids fluttered open. "Darius," she whispered faintly, "if I don't wake up, promise you'll keep the Grace Project alive." He shook his head violently. "Don't talk like that. You're not going anywhere." She smiled faintly. "Grace never dies, it just changes form." The line on the monitor trembled, then steadied again. Darius gasped in relief as the doctor said, "She's stable for now." He fell to his knees beside her bed, tears streaming down his face. "God, please. Don't take her. Not her." 2 days later, Zuri slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was Darius asleep beside her, his head resting on her arm, his eyes swollen from sleepless nights. She smiled weakly, brushing his hair with her fingers. "You worry too much," she whispered. He jolted awake, disbelief flooding his face. "Zuri, you're awake." "I told you I'd rest," she teased softly. He laughed through tears. "You scared me more than any business deal ever could." She smiled. "Then let's call it even." He took her hand and kissed it. "You're never leaving my sight again." She looked at him with tired but grateful eyes. "You can't guard grace, Darius. You can only live it." Later that evening, as she recovered, the hospital TV played a local news segment about the Grace Project. The reporter's words echoed softly through the ward. "From a poor beggar to a national symbol of hope, Zuri Cole has proven that grace can turn ashes into beauty. Her foundation now supports over 1,000 women nationwide. Tonight, we celebrate not just her recovery but her resilience." Darius turned off the TV and whispered, "They're talking about my wife." Zuri smiled. "No. They're talking about God's grace. We just happen to be the story." Elsewhere, Amara sat in her classroom late into the night, grading papers. She paused, looked at her ring and smiled faintly. "She survived," she whispered. "Of course she did. Sometimes peace doesn't come as applause, it comes as quiet gratitude." And in that moment, 3 lives once shattered by pride and pain stood on the same ground of redemption. Morning sunlight filtered softly through the blinds of Zuri's hospital room. The scent of disinfectant was still sharp in the air, but peace hung over the space like a quiet hymn. Zuri lay awake, weak but smiling, her hand entwined with Darius's as if letting go might undo all they had survived. Darius brushed her palm with his thumb. "You scared me, Zuri. I thought I was going to lose you." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You can't lose grace, Darius. It doesn't belong to one person, it flows." He smiled faintly, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "You and your sayings. Even in sickness you teach me." "I'm not teaching," she murmured, eyes half closed. "I'm reminding." At that, he laughed quietly and looked toward the window where the city shimmered beyond the glass. Grace Project had become more than an initiative, it was a living promise. And now, it would carry her name in every community center, in every woman's story. 2 weeks later, Zuri was discharged. The world rejoiced, social media overflowed with love and prayers. Darius drove her home himself, refusing to let anyone else take the wheel. Their mansion in Ikoyi no longer felt like a fortress of marble, it felt alive. The maids had decorated the front yard with white balloons that read, "Welcome home, Madame Zuri." She laughed when she saw them. "Did you plan this?" she asked. Darius smiled sheepishly. "Maybe. They insisted. I just paid for the balloons." That night, they had dinner under the open sky. No cameras, no assistants, no reporters. Just candles, grilled plantain, and the sound of the lagoon. Zuri looked across the table and said, "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been if you hadn't stopped that day at the bus stop?" Darius nodded slowly. "All the time. I keep thinking, what if I'd looked away?" She smiled. "Then someone else would have seen me. Because when grace is sent to you, it finds its path." He reached across and took her hand. "Then I'm grateful the path led straight to me." They sat in silence, their eyes meeting under the glow of lantern light. For once, silence wasn't emptiness, it was peace. Meanwhile, Amara stood before her students in the small Surrealire classroom, writing on the board. Lesson: Pride builds walls. Grace builds bridges. "Who can explain what that means?" she asked. A little boy raised his hand. "It means when you are proud, you stay alone. But when you forgive, people come back." Amara smiled, nodding slowly. "Exactly, Chuka. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't for the other person. It's for you." The class clapped softly. Amara turned to look at the tiny window where the sun poured in, thinking of Darius and Zuri. Somewhere deep inside she didn't envy them anymore. She admired them. They had become the kind of people she once pretended to be. When class ended, she sat at her desk, opened her journal and wrote, I used to chase validation. Now I chase purpose. That is how Grace found me too. A month later, the Grace Project held its biggest event yet, the National Women's Upliftment Conference at Eco Convention Center. The hall glittered with chandeliers, cameras, and faces from all walks of life, governors' wives, business leaders, and women from the streets who had found new lives through the project. Zuri stepped onto the stage, wearing a flowing emerald gown that mirrored the ring on her finger, the same ring that had once symbolized a broken promise, now shining as a redeemed blessing. Darius watched her from the front row, his heart swelling with pride. When she spoke, her voice filled the hall. "Grace," she began, "isn't just kindness. It's power, the kind that rebuilds what shame destroyed. It's what lifted me from a traffic light to this stage. But it's not mine alone. Every woman who has fallen and risen carries it too." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the hall. "People once called me a beggar. But what I begged for wasn't money, it was mercy. And mercy found me through love." Applause thundered through the hall. Then, to everyone's surprise, she gestured to someone at the back. The spotlight swung, revealing Amara walking slowly toward the stage. The crowd murmured in shock. Zuri extended her hand with a warm smile. "Tonight, I want to thank someone who taught me that pain can also lead to redemption. Please welcome Mrs. Amara Okoye, my sister in grace." The audience erupted in applause as Amara joined her on stage. She was visibly emotional. "I didn't come here to speak," Amara said softly, "but Zuri's invitation reminded me of something. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it releases its hold. I once hurt others out of pride. Now I use my pain to help others heal." She looked at Zuri. "Thank you for showing me what true humility looks like." They embraced, and the cameras captured it. Two women once divided by love and pride, now united by forgiveness. Darius rose to his feet, leading the standing ovation. Even some reporters wiped away tears. That night, as the event ended, Darius found Zuri standing alone outside the venue, watching the lights shimmer over the lagoon. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You've changed so many lives, Zuri. Including mine." She turned slightly, smiling. "And you've given me wings." He kissed her forehead. "I think your wings were always there. I just made sure no one clipped them." They stood there quietly for a moment. The wind carried laughter, music, and the faint call of the city beyond. "Do you realize," he said softly, "that this entire story started with one act of kindness?" She nodded. "And it ended with one act of forgiveness." They held each other, and the night seemed to pause in reverence. A year later, the Grace Project had spread to Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa. Thousands of women and children were being trained, sheltered, and educated. Every center had a quote on its entrance wall, Zuri's words in bold gold letters. "Grace is not for the perfect, it's for the willing." Darius and Zuri often visited the centers unannounced, choosing to sit and listen rather than speak. Fame no longer excited them, impact did. Amara's community school became one of the Grace Project's partners. Once a rival, she was now family. And Kenichi? He disappeared quietly from the city's headlines but was later rumored to be working as a volunteer counselor in a small rehabilitation home in Ibadan. For once, he was rebuilding instead of destroying. One evening, as the sun set crimson over the lagoon, Darius and Zuri stood on their balcony watching the waves. Zuri leaned on his shoulder. "We've been through everything, haven't we?" He smiled. "Storms, scandals, heartbreak, grace, and love." She looked up at him. "If we could do it all over again, would you still stop at that traffic light?" He laughed. "Every single time." She smiled. "Then maybe grace was waiting for both of us that day." He kissed her softly. "And we'll keep walking in it, together." The camera of life would have ended there, on two people who had every reason to hate, yet chose to heal, who lost everything the world said mattered only to find what truly did. The world called it a fairy tale. But those who truly watched knew, it was a testimony. Because love without pride and grace without condition had turned a billionaire and a beggar into the same thing, whole. Comment your thoughts below, Red Heart. Tell us where you're watching from and what moment moved you the most. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to join more unforgettable African tales like this one.